Well, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's presentation of our Stage Stories program at the Wallis Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Beverly Hills, California. For those of you who are not familiar with the Wallis, our organization was given an amazing opportunity by the city of Beverly Hills to reimagine a historic post office building as a center for the performing arts. And after many years of effort and raising the needed funds, we opened as the Wallis in 2013 with two beautiful theaters and a dedicated education wing, which allows us a space to support arts learners of all ages, from young children to the older adults that you'll meet today. Indeed, education is a central part of our mission, and believe that all of us have the capacity and indeed the right to grow in and through the arts, to grow as artists and to grow as people. In recent years, we've expanded our programming for older adults, led by my terrific colleague, Debra Pasquerette, who has done such a masterful job in both envisioning these programs and leading them through the weekly classes. The participants that we're going to meet today joined the program during the pandemic. So while we have helped forge a community online, most of the folks have not had a chance to meet in person or even to be at the Wallis. But we feel very fortunate that we've been able to provide this safe space for them to grow, for them to get in touch with their own creativity, and for them to find the courage to share their stories, some of them very joyous and some of them very difficult and very painful. And again, I want to really thank Debra for creating that environment that is not just a class you take to get some skills as an individual, but really becomes a close-knit community of support, of loving support during this pandemic when so many of us have been isolated and alone. So I want to thank our participants for their great work. Thank you for joining today. To give them an audience, I would say normally, if that's such a word, this would be in our black box theater on stage with an audience of friends and families. And since we can't do that today, I'm glad we can do it via Zoom. So again, thanks for joining us. And now let me welcome to our virtual stage my colleague, our manager of community engagement at the Wallis, the wonderful Debra Pasquerette.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I am Debra Pasquerette, and as Mark let you know, I am the instructor, although I will again say that these students have taught me more than I could ever possibly teach them in our meetings that we've had since February in our virtual classroom here in our Zoom land. I am so lucky. I have the best job in the world that I get to sit in the same space and hear stories that are absolutely incredible from everyone's lives. This group of people have never met each other. They have not met me, most of them, actually, I think all of them. We have students today that are in New York, that are in Northern California. We are excited to welcome people from across the country to join us at the Wallis through the virtual learning. And so together, we have created a very close-knit group and community. I think you will see from their connection with each other what's been created in the space. You'll hear them talk about today, some of them will mention a prompt that they responded to. And part of the class is giving them ideas or prompts to jump off on to talk about in their pieces when they're writing. And you will see that there may be several people that have the same prompt and a story that has nothing to do with each other. And I like to, as the instructor, never give them the exact direction I want them to go, because I want them to have the freedom to explore their creativity, to explore their past, to look at their history, and to come up with what they want to talk about. And so you'll hear about that. At the end of the show, we will have a few minutes for questions and answers with the writers. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I will facilitate that at the end of the reading. So I would love to introduce our first storyteller, Elaine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine, and I'm going to share with you my piece entitled, Give Me an Audience. And my prompt was something that made you feel authentic and alive. There it was, hanging in my mom's closet with her party clothes. I found her fur stole. You know, the one that has those little mink heads that open and close their mouth? I wrapped it around me and I marched in front of the full-length mirror. And at 7 years old, I proceeded to give my Academy Award speech, crying, thanking my agent and my parents. Around my pubescent years, I found out that Judy Garland was coming to the Hollywood Bowl. I wrote a personal letter. Dear Judy, I love you and I want to be a singer like you. Can you tell me what I should do? I'm 12 years old. I neatly addressed the envelope to Miss Judy Garland, Hollywood Bowl. I guess she never got it. I'm sure she would have answered. Even that didn't discourage me. I soon picked up the skill of lip syncing. I could never carry a tune. My first audience was personal and private and family in our living room. As I pretended to belt out, I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair from South Pacific. As you can tell, I still can't carry a tune. Well, I went from the living room audience to the famous Ciro's nightclub at 8433 Sunset Boulevard with a lip sync rendition of Louis Prima's That Old Black Magic. Well, it was for a school talent show, but it was thrilling. The highlight of all my auditions was for Danny Kaye. His daughter Dina was a good friend of mine in the 7th grade. She invited me to go to Palm Springs and casually said, "Oh, my dad is going to drive us down." That was all I needed to hear. I spent the next few weeks rehearsing every joke I knew. Dina and I sat in the back seat of the car. I started telling my jokes one after another. Mr. Kaye just kept driving. I saw him smiling in the rearview mirror. I was going to be in his next big movie. About 10 minutes into my routine, Dina smiled and whispered in my ear, "Elaine, he thinks you're funny, but that's enough." Well, then I went on to do a showcase at the Zephyr Theater on Melrose Avenue. When you coming back to the Five and Dime Jimmy Dean? There were only 3 people in the audience, but I was tingling all over. That's when I realized that having an audience, no matter how big or small, made me feel alive. I guess I've always been auditioning even when nobody knew it. Richard Dreyfuss, cute, freckle-faced, chubby little guy, and I were acting partners and friends in high school. We did Ionesco's The Chairs, but we had the most fun doing improvs together. He was a riot. Who knew that 10 years later, he was going to make it and I wasn't? He was shooting Jaws in Martha's Vineyard, and I had a friend who lived there deliver one of my famous personal notes to Ricky on the set. "Dear Ricky, it's me, your funny acting partner from high school. When you get back to LA, it would be great to hear from you and reconnect." I was so excited that I went out and bought one of those very first versions of an answering machine. I think it weighed about 10 pounds and took up a good portion of my den floor. Well, I spent the next 3 days rehearsing what I was going to put on the recording. So when Ricky heard my clever message, he would want me in his next film. I finally ended up doing a very loud tap dance routine on the kitchen floor. And I said on the recording, "This line is being tapped." I sat by the answer machine for a year, it seemed like, waiting and wondering if Ricky ever got my note. Fast forward to my current PR career that requires me to be at major events when there are news reporters covering. Often the reporters put me in front of the camera and say, "Hey, you can take it from here. You know more about this event than I do." I love the feeling of holding a mic and knowing there's a huge audience out there. But my longest running performance ran straight for 13 years when I was an 8th grade US history teacher. Once that bell rang and class started, I had a captive audience that was forced to listen to my impersonations and silly dialects. I must admit, though, I still find myself occasionally practicing my Academy Award speech in front of the bathroom mirror. And now, allow me to present my theater classmate, Judy, who will share her amazing story with all of you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That story was just great. The prompt for my piece was noise, and my piece is called The Noise. The noise was unmistakable. The sound of metal crashing, the screeching of tires, the sound of my voice repeating, "Oh, fuck, oh, fuck." Then, "Honey, are you okay? Are you okay?" A white cloud appeared before me. The screeching continued. Then the silence, the stillness. I realized I was alive. At the same time, we asked each other, "Are you okay?" He was, except for burns and bleeding on his wrists from the airbags. I thought I was okay until I looked at my wrists hanging at an odd angle, and then the excruciating pain set in. I actually never thought I was going to die, but according to the CHP and the witnesses, they couldn't believe we were alive. We were on the 405 heading north. We had been in San Diego all week working. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, March 23rd, 2019. I had just hung up from speaking with my daughter, and we were talking about making reservations for brunch the next day. We were in the Camp Pendleton area with a wide open view of the ocean on one side and the mountains and lush greenscape on the other side. My husband was driving in the carpool lane, going about 80 miles an hour. When out of the corner of my eye, I saw a car from the far right lane turning left right across the freeway. The problem was he was going at least 80 miles per hour too. There was nothing we could do. Before even having a chance to slam on the brakes, we crashed into him and spun a 180. It's a wonder he wasn't dead from the impact. Once the CHP arrived on scene, they realized he was out cold. Later determined it was caused by the meth he was on. Ambulances arrived. His injuries were so bad that he had to be helicoptered out. So I had to wait to be taken to the hospital until the helicopter left. It took an hour before they could load me into the ambulance. I really felt bad for all the people stuck in traffic. Another 25 minutes to get to the hospital. In the meantime, I was able to get my daughter on the phone to tell her what had happened. She and my son-in-law drove from Sherman Oaks to the hospital in Mission Viejo, where they were taking us. The pain was so bad. All I could do was lay there. They couldn't give me any pain meds until surgery because I'm allergic to most painkillers. By the time I was finally taken into surgery, 6 hours had passed. It turned out that my wrist was completely crushed and dislocated in 2 places. Surgery took about 2 hours. I came out with a titanium plate and 6 screws. The recovery has not been fun. My husband had to drive me to PT twice a week for over 6 months as I couldn't drive. 6 months later, another surgery. I had to have the plate and screws removed because it turned out that the screws were too big and impairing my healing. Another 4 months of PT, then another year of healing. 2 years have just passed and I am much better now, but I am still in pain whenever I overuse my hand. It took only seconds for a life-altering event to occur. I couldn't drive for over a year, couldn't really work, but I am very grateful each and every day to be alive. And now I'd like to introduce you to our next amazing storyteller, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Judy. My name is Elizabeth, and the title of my story is My Encounter with Someone from My Past. I'm not one to reflect back on my life. I have always been more interested in looking forward. Thus, every 10 years, when I got the invitation to my high school reunion in the mail, I would look at it and wonder, why on earth would I spend good money traveling to Los Angeles to spend an evening with people who are no longer my friends? The thought of having to put on a superficial face and pretend that I'm interested in seeing these people from high school seemed no less than torturous. And just like that, the invitation would immediately be thrown into the trash bin. Shari was my friend from childhood, and we still stayed in touch. That was good enough for me. Yet every 10 years, she would remind me of the upcoming reunion and suggest I join her. One time she explained, Liz, I'm tired of having to answer the question, how's Liz? Still, I was never swayed. That was until about my 40-year reunion. It was June 2018, and I finally decided it was time for me to show up and face my past. For the pre-party, I met Shari and Suzanne at Monty's Steakhouse on Ventura Boulevard, where the bartender is known for making generous-sized martinis. We sat on the bar stools, caught up, had a few laughs, downed our liquid courage, and headed out to the reunion at the nearby hotel. Walking into the hotel lobby, I hadn't had a chance to get nervous before we stumbled into the hotel lobby bar. It was packed full of chirping women. Shari grabbed my hand and led me over to a beautifully coiffed woman. She excitedly said, "It's Julie, our old best friend from elementary school." Then Andrea appeared. She was my best friend from high school. I screamed with joy. I was so thrilled to see them. We all screamed with delight together. The whole night moving forward, I ran into so many friends from my past. First, I'd have to read their name tag because many were unrecognizable. And then I'd see a glimmer of what still existed as their old face. And then I'd scream with excitement and give them a big hug. I had forgotten these faces from my past, women that I had once loved and were part of my life. My heart was exploding with the love that we had all shared long ago and still bonded us today. This was a part of my life, my childhood, that I had simply forgotten about. The whole experience was so emotional for me that at one point, I ran into the bathroom and burst into tears, looking in the mirror and murmuring to myself, it's all too much. That evening, I encountered someone from my past, someone I had not seen in many years, and that person was me, the Liz of my childhood, who had so many friends that I loved and they loved me, the part of myself that I had left behind long ago, that part of myself that I had not recognized nor connected with in over 40 years, if it had not been for finally attending my high school reunion. And now I'd like to introduce Linda, my classmate and a wonderful writer.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I love your storytelling and self-discovery. Hi, my name's Linda Singer, and my piece is entitled, What a Deal. In 2008, I came down with a serious case of pneumonia and was hospitalized. It was a serendipitous event. While hospitalized, x-rays were taken and a small dot was discovered in my right breast. 6 months before my scheduled mammogram, I was lucky that they found the spot early and lucky that it was small. At the time, I had begun a relationship with Bill, a retired television director, and that relationship had just shifted into high gear, if you know what I mean. I didn't want to scare him off with this cancer thing, so I played it down. In fact, I played it down for everyone. I didn't want to deal with any of those sad, pitying faces, so I made light of it. And I sent out invitations to my goodbye booby party. Yeah, I had a celebration for my boob and friends and coworkers, and I even wrote a poem about my loyal booby. When the day of surgery came, they had decided to remove the entire breast. A plastic surgeon had joined the surgery team, and he informed me that he was going to insert a device under the skin that would stretch out the skin over time and create a space for a new boob. It was kind of like pumping up a flat tire. Once the skin was stretched out, he would slide in an implant. Can you give me bigger tits? I asked. I decided I should get something out of the deal after all. He smiled and said that he could and he would. After the surgery, they moved me into a recovery room. I was still under anesthesia, but I could hear things going on around me, and I was aware of people and movement. And I heard my friend Bill talking to the surgeon. The doctor asked him, and what is your relationship to the patient? I heard Bill reply, I'm her lover. Now, at the time, Bill was 78 years old, so you can imagine how he looked standing there spouting, I'm her lover. I tried to rouse myself. I tried to protest. No, significant other. But I couldn't quite reach consciousness. I was a little embarrassed by his proclamation, and I rolled my sedated eyes. 5 years later, Bill passed away and listed me as beneficiary for his residuals. I received a ton of paperwork to fill out from the Director's Guild in order to receive those checks. Halfway down the last page, I came across a question. What is your relationship to the deceased? I stalled a moment, saw Bill's smiling face in my mind's eye, smiled to myself as I knew that I was pleasing him when I answered, I was his lover. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce the fabulous storyteller, Anne.
Thank you, Linda. That was a wonderful love story. My name is Ann Doherty, and the prompt that I vote to is, when have I been most authentic in life? The title of my story is Waking Up. You ask, when have I been most authentic in my life? The most real, most present. I am most authentic now in 2021. City of Ventura, California, 4283 Varsity Street, age 67. I wasn't necessarily inauthentic before. I've had times when I've been actually heroic. I've been incredibly wise and wonderful. I've done selfless and loving acts. But being authentic to and with myself isn't about that. It's about being all of me. It's not about getting stuck with the saint versus the sinner, the virgin versus the whore, the black versus the white, the all versus the nothing. All of that duality is the crap I was taught growing up in a perversion of what Catholicism is meant to be, what it is supposed to be. The duality crap is the stuff the educational system teaches. Right versus wrong, left versus right, my way versus the highway. It's always this system of pick one or the other, be this way or that way. What I now know is that being real means I accept the reality that I contain multitudes. As what the poet Walt Whitman says, I am composed of many conflicting parts. They are not neatly arranged. They do not come forward at scheduled and predictable times. I carry a gang around with me all the time. It's the Many Faces of Anne movie. Coming to see and accept this reality makes me a better person, because when I live in duality, I am capable of turning on a dime. Why? Because when parts of me that I deny come out, I have to deny it to you and do things to you because you've seen me be that way. I have to do something to you. I have to make you wrong for having witnessed what I don't want you to see or know about me. I don't want you or anyone else to see the drunk, loaded, crude, cruel, childish, selfish, vindictive, crazy, lazy, irresponsible, greedy, abusive, neglectful, spiteful, and/or angry, me. Therefore, I have to try to mess with your head and do what Trump Boy did. Tell you that you don't see what you see, you don't hear what you hear, and you don't know what you know. When Michael and I are in our couples therapy session with Esther, I find myself willing to acknowledge my lies and manipulations more readily. Being in relationship with me, particularly if you are my spouse or my children or other loved ones, it means that I will regularly try to mess with your head, regularly try to make you question your reality. Good news is that I've gotten better. I've gotten better because I've been able to verbalize that I often think Michael is out to hurt me intentionally. Then, with our referee / coach / therapist, Esther, I get to listen to Michael's actual intentions and see that I am most often simply wrong. I get to acknowledge to him and sheepishly admit to myself how I walk a mile to either make a fight or find a fight, because that's my usual learned way of trying to make a personal boundary in the relationship. I seem to have the same issues as 2-year-olds. I have to remember to use my words. In therapy and some other places, I hear myself come clean about the many ways I have hidden out in this 30-year marriage. I do not need to drink or get stoned in order to avoid my loved ones. All I need to do is isolate with TV or books or food or shopping, or simply stay in a spin cycle in my head with anxiety or depression. So in this process of owning up, I am learning some really valuable things about me. I have a lot of fear, a lot of insecurities, a lot of escape hatches. I like to do guest appearances in life, like they do on Colbert, Fallon, and Kimmel on late night, or on The View, The Talk, Ellen, or Dr. Phil in the daytime. Time for me to learn to host the Ann Show and have me be the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week only guest. Time for it now. Love in the world of coronavirus. The end. And now I'd like to introduce you to my fellow writer and storyteller, Marney.
Thank you, Anne. My prompt was to write about a moment in my past when I felt the most present. The title of my piece is A Young Girl's Dream. When I was 11 years old, I was given a poster that changed my life. A black and white silhouette of the lower Manhattan skyline over large block letters that read, New York City. I hung that poster on the pink wall of my bedroom, and it became my dream, my obsession to live in New York City. In spite of growing up in a one-hound town in rural Michigan, a place right out of Norman Rockwell's sketchbook, I felt I knew all about big cities because I had read about them. Our family only read books, no television, no rock and roll, just books. To be sure, there was no censorship in our house regarding books. We kids read what our parents were reading in the 50s. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Dos Passos, Faulkner, Steinbeck, O'Hara. Yes, even Henry Miller. We walked every Tuesday evening as a family to the small city library where we read all the national magazines and exchanged armloads of books. At the end of my second year of college, my father called to say he was driving down to Ann Arbor to pick me up and to be packed and ready. I said, "Don't come, Dad. I won't be here. I'm going to New York." How I got to New York is a complicated story, involving a boy, of course. New York City was the target of my dream, but when I look back, I think it was probably only the symbol of my desire to be free, my desire for independence, for freedom from an overbearing father, freedom from the confinement and limitations of small town customs and small town thinking, freedom not to marry the boy next door or become a perfect wife and homemaker like my mother. In my dream, I didn't even care what I'd do when I got to New York City. Sometimes my plan was to be a ballerina or a rockette at Radio City Music Hall. Anything so long as I earned my own keep, made my own decisions, and answered to nobody. 3 years later, in January, on the eve of my 21st birthday, I left my Madison Avenue office, walked west to Fifth Avenue, and turned uptown toward 42nd Street. Picture me, 6 feet tall, in my high-heeled Italian leather, black knee-high boots, my new black fitted double-breasted Russian greatcoat with the high stand-up collar, and a big white sheepskin hat that tied under my chin with black suede ribbons. It was just getting dark, and as I looked up, snow began to fall, huge fluffy flakes that reflected the city lights and filled the sky with diamonds. I felt snowflakes on my cheeks, also tears, as I realized in that moment that all my dreams had come true. I was suddenly terrified. Now what will I do? Now what is my dream? Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce you to my classmate and new friend, Farla.
Thank you so much, Marney. I'm Farla, and the title of my story today is, Did You Ever Encounter Someone from Your Past? I was nervous. I was scared. My body was shaking. Did I have the correct documents? Were the application papers in order? Had my studies been sufficient for the pending exam on American history? What questions would the officer ask me during my interview? These were the thoughts going through my mind as my husband and I sat at the Immigration and Naturalization Office in downtown Los Angeles. To apply for citizenship, one has to meet certain criteria in addition to living in the United States for at least 5 years. Furthermore, as part of the naturalization process, an individual has the opportunity to change his or her name. We were now taking the necessary steps to become naturalized citizens. We sat and waited until our names were called. After being questioned by an officer on American history, I was summoned to submit my application papers. I walked up to the window, which I recall looked like a large animal cage with bars around the upper half of the structure. The officer greeted me with, "May I have your application?" My hands were trembling. I carefully passed the papers through the slot. He gathered my documents and proceeded to carefully look them over, and in a loud voice declared, "Farla Binder, I know you. You were my Hebrew school teacher." He was very excited and animated. Once he shared his name, I remembered this innocent little boy, Brian, who sat at the back of the class, always totally engrossed in his studies. I had not seen him for 15 years. Brian continued to speak about his experiences in my class and how much influence I had on his Jewish education. He offered to help me in any way he could to make the naturalization process a little easier. He declared this was the perfect time for him to show his gratitude. I thanked him for his kind gesture and stated if he signed my papers, that would be more than sufficient. I really want to do something special for you today. I want to find a way to thank you. Would you like to change your name? I thought for a moment and confessed there had been an error on my birth certificate. My parents had given me a middle name at birth. However, When the name was recorded in Canada, a different name appeared on my birth certificate. I told him I would be overjoyed if I could change my middle name. He was thrilled to help out and stated this was the perfect time to take care of this matter. My new name would now appear on all my naturalization documents. Several months later, my husband and I participated in a special ceremony at the music center. Taking the oath of allegiance is the final step for citizenship. During this momentous occasion, I received my naturalization certificate with my new middle name, due to an encounter with someone from the past. It is my pleasure to now introduce an incredible writer, Elise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farla. What a wonderful, touching story. My name is Elise, and the prompt that I'm responding to is, write about a story that you've never told. And the title of my piece is, My Father Was a Crossdresser. My father was a crossdresser, or at least I think he was. My mom and dad were next door neighbors who married when my dad was 22 and my mom was just 20 years old. Their marriage lasted 8 years and produced 3 daughters. In the late 1960s, there was no such thing as a no-fault divorce. Couples had to prove grounds, and women didn't have the resources or freedom that they have now, which made it difficult for them to be on their own. Divorce was rare and almost a taboo subject. That said, I didn't have any friends whose parents didn't live together. When my parents split up, my mom moved me and my 2 sisters to Stonington, Connecticut, to be near my grandmother. We were 4, 5, and 6 years old. Most of the time, my dad visited us there, taking us out for dinner or a movie on a Thursday or a Sunday. We rarely stayed at the rental that he moved into, but we would occasionally visit him there. I can still remember my surprise the first time I opened my dad's medicine cabinet and saw that it was full of makeup. It felt like a treasure trove since my mom wasn't big on dressing up. I used to try it all on secretly, spraying myself with perfume and making up my face. When I asked my dad why he had so many cosmetics, he said that my mom had left them there. Very suspicious, right? But at the time, I just took his word for it, and also took a lipstick home now and then. Same with the closet full of women's dresses in the back of the apartment that I discovered. Silky, glittery clothes that my mom certainly wouldn't wear. When I asked my dad about them, he said mom had just left them behind. When I returned home, I told my mother she needed to retrieve them because they're really fancy. Mom just laughed and said, I'll get them the next time you visit. But she never did. During one overnight, there was a sewing machine out in the kitchen with piles of paisley cloth folded neatly next to it. When I asked whose it was, my dad said it was his, that he was making curtains. When I looked incredulous, he said he was kidding, that his cleaning lady was helping him out and making curtains for him. But between the strange look on his face and his nervous laughter, I wasn't sure what to believe. Finally, on a sunny day my sisters and I all remember, there was a pair of red rhinestone cat-eyed sunglasses on the dashboard of Dad's convertible when he came to pick us up. when we asked whose they were, he said they were his. And he proceeded to wear them the rest of the day. Believe me, he looked ridiculous, but he definitely owned it. So, did my father wear makeup and women's dresses and red rhinestone sunglasses when he wasn't with us? Did he secretly sew curtains? Or maybe, I wonder, did my dad have a girlfriend